I'm not going to go too deep into this before we take on the Heisman. Just a side note, because you touched on it in regards to Hendon Hooker's injury and that impacting the playoff. And I am so glad that Tennessee is just obviously out, just like Alabama's obviously out, because I would have hated to have seen a situation where the committee had like two teams that they're looking at, including Tennessee, right on that line. And they said, well, Hendon Hooker got hurt. Tennessee's out because Hooker got hurt. I understand that evaluation. There's no question that hurts their team considerably. However, there was a team in Ohio State in 2014 that lost two quarterbacks.
Yeah, two.
They had one game. They had a one-game chance to prove that they were just as good with a third-string quarterback. They got that opportunity and proved it, and so they got the playoff bid. I would hate for 100 players in a locker room and coaching staff to be told, well, you had no chance to prove that you were the same team without that player, so you got left out of the playoff. That seems so unfair to me.
Well,
that
and
there's just judgment made like that.
It just ignores that football's a team game. Like Hendon Hooker goes out, and I'll completely admit I was very nervous about that Vandy game going in, the final game of the season. It was raining and gross, and Vandy beat Florida and Kentucky in back-to-back weeks coming into that game. And I was like, oh boy, I had an ominous feeling coming into that where I was just like, this rain and everything. And Tennessee won by 60. So I don't know. You don't know. Like, it's a team game. Tennessee went out and they had a huge running day that day in the rain. They went out on the ground and just killed Vandy. And so, it's not, yes, Hooker was massive for this team and one of the best players in college football all season long. But you can't just guarantee that they're done for with Joe Milton. And I say that in relation to any other team that might happen to you. You can't guarantee. It's not a one-man sport. It's a team game. And maybe Tennessee's defense makes big plays, or maybe the offense, other players on the offense make big plays that aren't the quarterback. And you just don't know. So I completely agree. That would have been an absolute shame if something like that happened and we had to make the excuse of, oh, well, this player's injured, so they're out. That's gross.
Through 2/3 of the season, most people would have said Hendon Hooker is the favorite to win the Heisman. And here we are 4 weeks later, he gets hurt, although it barely compromises his stats or his season. He missed one game. And we see that I think it's understood he's not going to win the Heisman, but it's still a huge deal and a huge privilege and honor to be invited to the ceremony. There's only 4 guys. Well, we've got 4 quarterbacks there. And if you would have asked me, okay, who's going to be the 4th quarterback selected, even with CJ Stroud losing his last game, I would have only guessed for sure the first 2 with Caleb Williams and Max Duggan. Then I would have been scrambling and probably would have come up with CJ Stroud. Then I would have said Hendon Hooker, not Stetson Bennett. I even would have said Blake Corum, the Michigan running back, but I would not have come up with Stetson Bennett. And I like Stetson Bennett. I've got no issue with Stetson Bennett, but he's not a Heisman finalist.
Bryce Young, too. I mean, I would throw in there, had missed a game and had stats far better than Stetson Bennett's stats on the season. This was unconscionable. I don't know what these people were thinking, what their rationale is. I've seen some of their attempted rationale. It's absurd. It makes no sense at all. It's an embarrassment for an award that was already pretty much an embarrassment. It's just a popularity contest. It's typically goes to the best player on the best team. This year, I think it's going to go to the best player on one of the best teams. I think it's going to be Caleb Williams. I mean, his stats are, he really killed it at the end of the season. He really did a great job. And even in that Pac-12 game, it got away from them at the end, but he had a great game even still, despite being hurt.
Yep.
And you can think what you want about him painting F Utah on his fingernails and all that stuff. And there is sort of talk that it's like a character award also, but like Johnny Manziel won it. Let's don't delude yourself into thinking that's going to be a huge part of it. But this is so stupid. The Stetson Bennett thing. I agree with you. There's a very, very small chance that Hendon Hooker would win this award. Just the circumstances. It is what it is. It's very unfortunate. But the fact that he got left off this stage, he played 2 full games less than Stetson Bennett and still had better stats than this guy. And it's not just stats based, but I think it's also importance to the team. And that's where I take the biggest qualm with this whole thing. You take Stetson Bennett away from Georgia, they're still really good. It could be me out there, and they're going to still be pretty good because it's the best defense in college football. And that's where I have a real problem with it. I could go out there and hand the ball off, like I could figure it out. And so, yes, he is a pretty good football player. Pretty good football players don't win the Heisman Trophy. And I kind of like you, I don't have a huge problem with Stetson Bennett. I think he's a little showy for a guy who really is kind of carried by the team around him, in my personal opinion. But that's a sort of different discussion. But it just really is a shame because there were a number of guys better than him, and he gets up there because of the team he plays on, and purely because of the team he plays on. Like, really, I would put the Georgia defense. Can the whole defense be a Heisman Trophy finalist? Because that would make more sense. He's not even the best player on that offense. It's Brock Bowers. Brock Bowers is the best player on that offense. It's so stupid in so many different ways. It's completely indefensible. It's completely absurd. I don't know. And they tried to say, like, I saw a guy who was local. He used to be a Tennessee writer. Now he's a national writer. And his rationale was, it's basically a November award. You get yourself in the running through October, but then November is where it's won. And Hendon Hooker just didn't deliver in November, and he got hurt. I was like, Stetson Bennett threw for, I think it was like 302 yards and 1 touchdown or something against Georgia Tech and Kentucky combined. Both of those games in November. I'm sorry. Are those Heisman numbers? Are you kidding me? And we're just going to look over this. Maybe you've seen a more compelling argument than me, but all I've seen is flailing around from Georgia fans to be like, but he's, and they have nothing. It's completely stupid. And like I said, and you said too, a Blake Corum, a Bryce Young, a number of guys with a better argument than this dude. It's so crazy. It's so crazy, man.
This does tell us, though, that he's in the top 4 in the voting, correct?
I believe that is the indication.
Because they're not going to invite 4 guys and one of them finish 9th. Like, this tells us, and that's why the invites go out so late. They just went out on Monday.
I mean, to me, I was just looking. So there are 870 guys that vote for this award. And I think it's split up by region. They try to do, people that are football in the South, Northeast, West. I mean, it just says to me that, like, people outside of the Southeast didn't watch Georgia play this season. Like, I don't know how else I can rationalize this happening outside of these dudes just saw this guy's highlights on ESPN after the game, and they're like, oh, he's a quarterback for the number 1 team. And like, that has to be it, right? Like, they just didn't watch. It's like how none of us watch Pac-12 football. Caleb Williams is almost definitely going to win this award. And there's like 5 people who are SEC fans that watch Caleb Williams play this year. We just don't. We don't watch him play. And so I got to think half the country never even saw this dude play football this season. And they're half the voters for this thing. So maybe I'm wrong about that, and I'm not giving them the credit they deserve. But how else do you explain this? Maybe.
Oh, it's been proven. There's been research done, and I've seen all sorts of stats that show you that there is regional bias in the Heisman voting. Like, every year, not just 1 year, there is regional bias. And it makes sense. It's not right, but I think everyone's okay with it. That's why there's generally equal distribution. I can tell you firsthand that I moved to Connecticut about 20 years ago, started listening to sports radio out of New York. There were 2 guys that had a show in New York City they never talked college football the entire year until like rivalry week. Then they'd start Alabama, Auburn, Ohio State, Michigan. They would just mention a few things about it, but they're talking the Yankees and the Giants every day. They both had Heisman votes, and they didn't even know who the best players were. They had no idea.
There it is, right
They
there.
would always just reference, yeah, the Georgia quarterback, the Tennessee quarterback. They didn't even know their names. It was awful.
I mean, maybe that's your explanation right there. I think I said this on Twitter last night. I think there's just a really good case to be made that like the people that quote unquote cover this sport don't know about this sport. they know about the team that they cover, and in that case, they don't even cover a college football team. That's crazy. But like they just don't. And you can only, that is a little defensible. You can only have so much time to see things. Like here, I'm going to spend my time watching SEC football because that's what matters. And if Tennessee isn't directly related, they're tangentially related to anything that happens in SEC football. So I watch that primarily. And then when the big games that matter are on in other conferences, I'll watch that too. And so that it does make sense to me. But to give these guys a vote on the biggest award of the entire season is just crazy. And like I used to be a voter for one of those awards, the Bednarik. And I mean, what you end up doing, because you can't watch all those guys. It's like 100 dudes that are up for those awards. You just look at the stats. And that's why I think there's actually a pretty good chance that Jalen Hyatt's going to win the Biletnikoff, because I think a lot of people just look and they go, well, he has better stats against better opponents than Marvin Harrison Jr. does. And they're not going to go and like look at the minute. Like I was tweeting about that, and a lot of Ohio State fans were like, well, Marvin Harrison made a lot of great contended catches and stuff. The people that vote for this award didn't see him do that. they didn't. And, fair enough, I guess. Even you could say that to me, and I still disagree. I think Jalen Hyatt had the best season for a wide receiver in college football this year, and the best singular game for a wide receiver by a long shot in college football this year. But you just look at the nature of it. The Heisman Award is voted on by people that don't know about college football. The Biletnikoff Award is voted on by a bunch of people that probably didn't watch these players play every game. And so it's human error and it's dumb, but that's the way that it is. So that's, you have to, and that's why I kind of say to Tennessee fans, just don't put a lot of stock in this stuff. You watched what happened this season. You know how great it was, and that's what you have to take pride in.
Charlie Burris, Big Orange Podcast. Get on over there at A to Z Sports. We'll have Charlie on more times before the Orange Bowl to talk about the Clemson matchup. I did want to hit you on transfer portals. Pretty quiet, pretty silent.
For outgoing, yes.
For outgoing. For incoming, what are the priorities?
Whoa, where is there not one? I think you have big players going out at the wide receiver position. So let's go get a wide receiver. There's already, I think it was 247 reported that Tennessee's spoken to Lovett, the kid that's transferring from Missouri. So they're kind of in play there. Also, wide receiver from Oregon and wide receiver from it's a cornerback from Virginia. I've looked at so much of this over the last few days. But that's just some where I've seen like they may have spoken with, be in contention for these kids. But I think your big ones, your really big ones, wide receiver is just kind of gravy. You're going to have a good set of wide receivers. Brew McCoy is almost definitely coming back next year. I think he actually announced that he is coming back next year, and he's going to be an excellent wide receiver for you. That getting a transfer wide receiver, transfer running back, something like that's kind of gravy for this team. But you need a cornerback. You need a linebacker. You need defensive linemen. You need edge rushers. You need specifically on defense. I mean, we all watched Tennessee's defense this season. They need dudes on that side of the ball badly. You do really need a tight end. That's probably the biggest position of need on the offense, and offensive lineman too. You're losing your right tackle, who's been excellent this entire season, and he is aging out. And so, yeah, I mean, you gotta replace those guys. And they have a good recruiting class coming in, the number 11 recruiting class in America right now, that may get better before it's all said and done. But you just can't replace some great production with 18-year-olds a lot of the time. And so I think they're going to hit the transfer portal pretty hard. And even maybe quarterback. That's an iffy one. I think it might depend on Joe Milton's practices and play with this Orange Bowl if they seek somebody else. But there is just so many. I saw it's close to 700 dudes in the portal right now. Just an unreal set of guys that are trying to find, and they're not all going to find a spot. It's going to be pretty interesting to see how all that goes here in the next few weeks.
Absolutely, it will. And you brought up National Signing Day in the next couple of weeks as well. And so you have hopes of Tennessee improving its number 11 ranking.
You have the biggest one that happened this past week was Arian Carter. I want to say 5-star or highly rated 4-star linebacker. And he visited Tennessee this past week. Alabama, I believe, is the favorite in that one, and hopefully they made a good pitch to him. It's maybe an uphill battle, but that's an alarm on my phone. That's cool. It may be an uphill battle, but there is some pieces still floating out there that Tennessee could add. Say they win now, and I mean that's going to really bolster your recruiting class, and that's great. And on the side of the ball where you need players the most, so. I think they could still improve a little bit. It's mostly set. It is. And in fact, a bunch of those guys are actually going to be here even for the bowl practices. I believe I saw that Nico Yamaliava, the 5-star quarterback they have coming in, will be at these bowl practices too. And so that's awesome. I think that's great. You get them in the door where they can't be recruited any longer, and you get to see how they might play a little bit too. So that's really exciting. And I think if they can close out with an either borderline top 10 or best case scenario, a top 10 class, that's massive for Josh Heupel, and he can really capitalize on what's happened this season. And it'll be great to see. Hopefully it works out the way we're all wanting it to.